Philomythia podcast.
Welcome.
Getting it out.
I just can't review. I can't stop myself anymore.
Ohio. We're going to Ohio. We're driving to Ohio in the sky. So, Ohio.
Wow, nice. I thought you ended. I was like, that was a weird end, but
I was like, I want to say words, and they're failing me.
So, hello everybody.
Hello.
Thanks for listening again.
How you feeling, Ian?
You know, I feel like shit. Not like shit, but I feel pretty crappy right now.
Ian's a bit hungover.
Yeah, a little bit hungover. Can't tell if it's a cold that I kind of picked up or if it's just I drank too much.
Might be a little of both.
Yeah.
I mean, drinking too much will lower your immune system.
Yeah,
too.
and maybe I just have a little stuff kind of floating around. I was going to say something just then, but it's gone.
I interrupted you. I think you were going to talk about just, hey, if you like this, like, share, subscribe.
Oh, yeah. Like, share, and subscribe, y'all. Let us know where you're hearing us at. Just so you guys know, we definitely focus on YouTube.
That's kind of our home base. You don't have to listen to it there, but that's our focus.
Yeah, but that's where we interact most of the time. We do have a Facebook now.
We have a Facebook, and we have an email, so you can email us at info@philomythia.com. We've got a website, philomythia.com.
We do.
And we have a brand new newsletter coming out.
Yeah.
Once a month. It's going to be pretty cool. We're going to put extra stuff like our notes and a little bit more, like go in depth on the topics we talk about. It's only going to be once a month, so we're not going to blast you with like daily emails or anything like that. So if you like what we do, I think it'll be a cool addition to the Philomythia experience.
That's good. So yeah, hit it. Like.
Tap it.
Share. Mostly share is what I'd say right now. Help us by sharing.
Or just tell people. Word of mouth is super helpful.
Share it. Let us know. Tell people, hey, I like these guys. But that being said, I feel like shit.
He feels like shit.
We had the Forged campaign last night.
Oh, and it was a doozy.
It was a doozy.
Ian got the experience of wanting to murder all the players.
Everybody. Every single person in the group.
And I was there too, so he wanted to murder me at a certain point.
At certain points. And it's never... everybody does their own thing that they do that makes me want to kill them. And it's, my girlfriend is in the game, and...
it was session 2 for her, I think. Yeah,
this is her second real session in a campaign. She's played some one-shots with us and some other people, but this is the first time where she's had a character that it matters what she does, because she has to play that character again next week,
right?
And then the following week,
right? So
this is her first experience with that. And crosstalk on digital, when you're online, crosstalk is insane because it doesn't work. Talking over somebody when you're on a Zoom call is brutal. If you're a lower, quieter talker and you're talking over somebody to someone else in person, you can sometimes get away with that because the person you're talking to isn't really involved in what the conversation is, maybe. So that kind of crosstalk in person can be okay occasionally. But over Zoom, it's horrible. And the reason I bring her up is because I told her about it, and she's like, well, I'm just responding to when people say something. I'm like, that just perpetuates it. They're not helping, you're still doing. And she's like, oh yeah, that's a good point.
There was also, though, just asking questions about every single thing you were doing, which is that's kind of a no in D&D. You don't question everything the DM's doing because they have a plan, generally.
Right. I also give some grace in the scenario, just like we said, first time.
She's just starting out.
Yeah, first time. And also one of the other players that's experienced questions me all the time with their invisibility.
Oh my God. And it's like a conversation on repeat.
Every time he's like, okay, go invisible. And I'm like, noted. And then when it's my turn, he gets attacked. He goes, yeah, but I'm invisible. And I'm like, I know. Every time someone's telling me, no, not every time, 99% of the time when someone's telling me something and they're explaining it and they're taking moments out of the flow to tell me something, the response almost every time is, I already know that. I know that. I know. I'm doing this with the knowledge of that. Well, it doesn't stop it. Did I say it stopped it? No, then it didn't.
Right.
Every one of them I wanted to murder from it. But in the end, we had a great session, a lot of fun. But that leads me to my friend Eric here.
Yes.
Eric everyone talks about Eric's character in this game.
Everybody, he's a hit, apparently.
Well,
everybody, I love him, but I always love my characters.
Right. What's funny to me, and I was pointing this out to somebody, is Eric is just fun, you guys. You give Eric a character. If Eric likes the character at all, everyone's gonna love it. He's gonna have a blast. Everyone in the group's gonna love him. Like everyone loved Vash because Eric liked playing the character. Eric liked it. Everyone loves Cog. It is amazing, his character and what he does and how he acts, and it's amazing.
Let's break Cog down.
Let's talk about Cog.
He's a Warforged artificer, multi-classing with Beast Heart.
Right.
And he's forgotten everything. Like he has no memory of his prior life, and he was made a long, long time ago. And he doesn't have emotions, so he's fascinated by mortals when they have emotions. So if they're fighting, he'll like copy them. And he can also, because the Beast Heart, I didn't know this when I made it, but Beast Hearts can talk to animals. So if he sees an animal, he'll go talk to it and like have conversations. And he's just kind of innocent in a way, because he's a little more pure. He's not invested emotionally the same way as other characters.
Right.
He's just really fun to play.
And he mimics some of the characters going through emotional moments.
Yep.
And it adds this touch of levity that I think was sorely needed.
Yeah.
To kind of bring everyone out of the moments that transpired.
Right.
And a lot of the problem did start with the chaoticness of Roll20. Roll20 really gave us a problem last night.
It was enough that we're like, hey, maybe we should switch over to one of the other computer-based VTTs, because this is not the first time this has happened with Roll20, and it won't be the last. And this one was like,
bad.
What's happening?
Right. Like none of us know. But Cog is a great character. But I was talking to Eric earlier about, what I wanted to say is, if you give Eric a character that he really likes, or he makes a character and he likes it, you're going to have a good time. However, if Eric is playing a character he doesn't like, or you gave him one he doesn't like, and he's not digging it, kill that character immediately. Like, kill it.
I don't think that's happened yet, though.
Yeah, it did. For the in-person.
Oh, yeah. Well, I made that character.
Right.
It was cool, but again, that was the realization that, don't make an RP character, a role-playing character, in a Conan situation.
Right.
Because I couldn't do anything with him. I tried to do something, it was like, nah.
Right. And it was a cool character, but Eric was just like, I'm over this guy.
Yeah.
And I wish we would have followed your gut instinct when you're like, just let him die. And I was like, you want him to die? And you're like, nah, I don't care. Bring him back.
Right.
So we brought him back, and I think we should have just killed him. Like, let him die and let you roll a new guy.
Right.
But yeah, Eric, you make great characters, and you're a blast to play with.
Thanks.
When you're like, it's a fun thing. Like letting.
Thank you.
And again, I trust Eric implicitly when it comes to character creation, giving him freedom to do things, because I know that with this huge amount of freedom, he's not going to make a character that's just going to smash my game. He's going to make something that's interesting, and if it happens to smash my game, sorry, man.
And I always talk through, I mean, maybe there's times that I'm not remembering, but I will say almost always talk through things with my DMs about, hey, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. Is that cool? Like Ian, I missed 2 sessions ago. I had a crazy week, so I missed a session, but everybody got this item. So Ian's like, think about an item you want, see if it's cool. So I made an infusion table, which gives me a leg up on artificer infusions. And I said, this is all the things it does, Ian. Is that cool? And he's like, yeah, that seems okay.
Yeah. And it was awesome. Even the little infusions that you gave to your friends, to me, did not feel game breaking at all. It felt like a little boost. This game's Forged is broken anyway.
Right.
So that doesn't matter. But having the little things he added actually does give a little boost to everything. So I just want to commend you on your player etiquette.
Oh, thanks.
And role play skills.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about it a whole bunch, but I love this game, and that's my jam. Is like what's appropriate for this character in this situation. Like, how are they going to act? What are they going to do? Not what I want them to do, but what would they do?
Yeah.
Right. So.
Well, and I think that
I like it.
Building a homebrew world has been very shitty and fun at the same time.
Shitty.
Yeah, it's been real rough because, again, we've talked about it a little bit. I'm learning as I go. I'm not a professional. I'm figuring this shit out, and I have now figured out if you're gonna homebrew some stuff, man, put some forethought into some of that, because I have plans, but when it came to like making my characters powerful, I, again, just like in the old campaign, I stepped them up, and now they're stompers. So, but I like this world that I've created. I think there's merit to some of the ideas I've had, but one world that I really like, and I think Eric likes this one a lot, is Dragonlance.
Yeah, I do like it a lot, for sure.
And I feel like that's a good step into what we're going to talk about today.
Today the topic we picked is some of our favorite campaign settings. For right now, we're talking about campaign settings as it pertains to D&D, so official D&D settings. And we might do settings later on that aren't necessarily D&D. One of my favorites is Dragonlance.
Yeah.
It's actually the Chronicles, so Dragons of Autumn Twilight, Dragons of Winter Night, and Dragons of Spring Dawning. Those books are the reason why I love reading. And I'm going to reveal a weird thing about me right now, is I actually taught myself how to read when I was 11. And it was hands-off parenting, basically. I was homeschooled a lot, and my mom started to teach me how to read at the normal time. She could tell I was not into it, so she was like, okay, well, you're gonna learn the way you want to learn. And there's been really good things and bad things about that. But Jurassic Park came out, and I almost became a paleontologist. Like, I would go on digs, and Jurassic Park started that. So when that movie came out, I was like, I have to read this book. And reading Michael Crichton as your first book is tricky.
Yeah.
It's kind of like building your own campaign world. It's going to be rough.
It's going to be a rough time.
But by the time, I think it took me 6 months. By the time I was done reading that book, I could read. So I got my chops in. And then I think the next books I read was the Chronicles, and that's what made me fall in love with reading. So, like, it was that classic example of when you're done, you're like despondent. You don't know what to do. You feel like you've lost a family member. This is kind of paraphrased, but there's a video of Joe Manganiello talking with Todd Krynn, and Todd Krynn is he's employed by Wizards of the Coast, but he's more of a commentator. He does a lot of videos and Twitter, and he's a social personality. And they were talking about Dragonlance because Joe Manganiello is a Hollywood actor, script writer. He also runs a private D&D group with like Tom Morello and a bunch of these kind of celebrities you wouldn't think would play D&D, but it's like, that's probably a fun table to be at.
Oh yeah, I bet.
But he's actually friends with Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman, who created Dragonlance. It's really Tracy Hickman and his wife Laura, and then Margaret Wise came in later, but they're associated with the IP. And Manganiello has this great quote, which is, when people ask me what Dragonlance is about, it's Star Wars. It's tonally closest to The Empire Strikes Back. It's big. It's epic fantasy. It's constructed in a way that's closest to Star Wars. And I think that's pretty good. It's a good analogy, is that Star Wars is like the Dragonlance Dragonlance is like the Star Wars of D&D.
Oh, see, when you say it like that, I'm going to have to go, yeah, that makes sense. I'm on board with that. Yeah.
And I mainly had access to the AD&D books for my research. So they've been updated. There was a 3.5 edition of the campaign setting, and they also broke off and did a different rule set for the 5th Age as well. And apparently there's a huge division among fans of Dragonlance ever since Hickman and Weiss left TSR.
Oh.
There's been this weird back and forth because they haven't written all the books. There's been other authors,
Right.
TSR, and then later on Wizards created intellectual property that had nothing to do with Weiss and Hickman. And the Flame Wars have gone on ever since, apparently.
Oh.
I've never been a part of that, so I only have positive associations with Dragonlance. So, fun fact, Tracy Hickman is or was at least Mormon.
Oh.
And he actually moved from Utah to, is it Wisconsin, where TSR was?
Maybe.
Somewhere back there. And it's interesting as I've read more of the actual setting with my perspective now. It's like, I wonder how that influenced the setting, because Dragonlance and Tracy Hickman and his wife, Laura, have been hugely influential on what D&D is today.
Right.
It may not be what it is today if it wasn't for them. Also, Tracy and Laura created the Ravenloft setting originally, which we know as Curse of Strahd now in 5e, which is considered by many players to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And I think there's a lot of argument to be made that that's the case. And it's pretty big how influential this Mormon dude from Utah has been on nerd culture.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've read some various conflicting dates, but Dragonlance apparently was originally created around 1982-83, why Tracy and Laura were driving to Wisconsin to take this new job, which apparently his dad told him not to take. He's like, you failed at everything in your life. Don't do this.
Oh, no.
So he almost did. He's like, no, I'm going to do it. He was offered a job at TSR, and interestingly enough, TSR is the original company by Gary Gygax that housed D&D before Wizards of the Coast bought the property. TSR stands for Tactical Rules Studies.
That's an interesting little thing about TSR is growing up, that's what I knew was TSR. That was the thing. So like when it got switched to Wizards of the Coast, that was a trip to me because TSR was
synonymous.
Yeah, that was the D&D brand. So
no, yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to say that shows how old I am. Go on though.
I was the same way. Like even their little insignia, which had the red dragon that was like all twined up.
Yeah, it
was like that was D&D, and then Wizards bought it, and I was like, I hope this is a good thing.
And what's crazy is so the dragon with the TSR is your memory. Mm-hmm. What my memory is the letters TSR in red font. In this,
the blocks?
Yep, that's what my brain thinks of.
Nice.
So, yeah, little side thing for you, but go on.
Little side things. No, that's great. Yeah, TSR, I don't know what it is. It's that abbreviation, I guess, or those initials just have huge magical significance.
Me
you
too.
Hear it and you're like, ooh, that's the uncut shit right there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So Tracy and Laura, again, Tracy is a guy. There was a lot of debate about this because there were no pictures back when in the mid-90s. I thought Tracy Hickman and Margaret Wise were both women. There's a lot of fans that thought they were sisters. Oh. And apparently Tracy got a lot of love letters, like in marriage proposals.
That is
like, you're the only woman that understands me. It's like,
I'm a dude.
Wow, I'm a guy. And so they had been, I don't think they knew they were doing this illegally, but they had been publishing adventure modules illegally, in Utah before they got offered. So TSR actually called Tracy up and they're like, look, we have two ways we can go about this. We can take you to court and be embroiled in litigation, or we can hire you. And Tracy was like, all right, yeah, I'll take the job.
Right.
You know? But apparently there's some old modules like Pharaoh and Rasia, which I've heard of Pharaoh, but off in the distance.
Right.
Somewhere. It's not, but these are ones they were making way back in the day. Apparently, there were no dragons in Dungeons & Dragons before Dragonlance.
I know.
This is what I keep hearing, and it's like, that's really weird. And so Dragonlance, when Tracy sold them on the campaign world, this was kind of their rhetoric was, hey, we want to bring dragons into Dragonlance. Dragonlance was also the first time we got prestige classes. This is a side note, but I was like, I always kind of equated prestige classes with subclasses. That is not the case.
Oh, really?
Yeah, here's a quote from Monty Cook talking about prestige classes, which is the original design intention behind them was to allow DMs to create campaign-specific, exclusive roles and positions as classes.
Oh.
These special roles offer abilities and powers otherwise inaccessible to PCs and focus characters in specific, interesting directions. So the Knights of Solamnia would be a prestige class. Right?
That's so cool.
Yeah, I was like, that's really cool. Again, Monty Cook is kind of a genius when it comes to this stuff. He comes up with really cool ideas. And it's probably not just him, but he is the name that you hear.
Yeah.
I don't want to read through all of this, but Dragonlance was known as Project Overlord when they were working on it. The artists were immediately inspired. So you had the greats like Jeff Easley, Larry Elmore, Clyde Caldwell, Keith Parkinson.
Oh, those two top names you just said, those are the ones I grew up like knowing those. Yeah.
And Keith Parkinson made my all-time favorite painting, which is the Flying Citadel, which is the Dragonlance. You have the flying castle, and it's like the heroes of the lance are riding towards you on this plane.
Right.
I friggin' love that picture.
Yeah.
Super evocative. It's a big influence on my homebrew campaign world that I'm making now.
Right.
And I just love flight and like flying castles and that kind of thing.
Continue on with what you're doing, but I'm curious to know what you found out about, because it's been so long for me, like about the world.
I got that.
Okay,
I was
cool.
just going to say, because this is important to what we're going to get into about the campaign setting. Dragonlance rewrote some rules and broke conventions with the campaign setting. So it was the first time you had dragon riding, so a dragon rider was also a prestige class. Story arcs, that was actually Laura Hickman came up with that idea, and that's for Ravenloft as well. And then there's some other stuff and other factoids. So here's some interesting things about the actual campaign world. Is alignment is huge in Dragonlance, and there's very clear-cut divisions among the gods and among the races, and you don't have chaos and order. You have evil, neutral, and good. And alignment is actually something that the DM takes care of. So there, in the back of the book, there's actually the scale, and alignment is determined by your actions. So you start off with a certain alignment, but if you do certain things, the DM can actually start to slide that scale towards, like, if you're good and you start to act evil, you start to slide into neutral. And there's little gray areas on the scale in between the three alignments.
God, I love that.
And it actually affects your attacks and your AC.
What?
And yeah, it's really inspiring. I was like, man, I want to use this.
That is sick.
And this is another thing I should say, is that Adventures in Krynn, or Adventures in Dragonlance, which is the AD&D module, it's one of those books you want to own and like look to for inspiration. Like, it's just chock full of stuff that's awesome.
That's cool.
3 and 7 heavily feature in the world. So there's 3 different orders of knights. There's 3 orders of wizards. There's 3 divisions of gods, good, evil, neutral, and there's 7 in each division, essentially.
Oh.
And the magic users, the wizards, have to keep track of the moons, which there's 3 moons. And their magic is more or less effective depending upon what phase the moon is in. And there's a chart in there. And some people really love it. Some people hate it. But I think it's fascinating. Like, that's a really complex, in-depth way to interpret your magic.
Well, with the magic, what colors were the...
It's red, white, and black.
Okay. And
again, you have this evil, neutral, and good idea. So good, white, black, evil, red, neutral. That's how you would think about it.
Something with the moons, too, in that, I swear. They were like, the moons were the same colors as the... Wasn't it?
So you had the black moon, you had the red moon, and the white moon, and the black moon you didn't actually ever see.
It just looked like a hole in the sky, kind of, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's so cool. And you can start to see why maybe Wizards has been hesitant to publish Dragonlance, because alignment is so integral to this campaign world, and the community considers alignment so problematic that if they do publish it, I'm very interested to see the kind of changes they make. And another interesting thing is that this Dragonlance, the world, is called Krynn, and the continent they're on is called like Abalom or something like that.
Okay.
And it's like on the southern hemisphere. It's defined by trauma. So at a certain point, about 300 years before the Chronicles take place, and the Chronicles are not static, so there's a bunch of other books that have come out there in the Age of Mortals now, the Fifth Age. So the Cataclysm was basically the gods punishing Krynn for being evil. And that's the idea is of morality, that good choices lead to good outcomes. If you're evil, it's going to lead to bad outcomes for you. And so there's this inherent morality, which I think comes from the Hickman's Mormon background.
Yeah. Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah. And you have things I've been listening back through Dragons of Autumn and Twilight on audiobook. And it's interesting because when the story starts, the gods are not there. There's no dragons, there's no gods, and clerics are considered charlatans. So Raistlin, who's now my favorite character, it used to be Tasselhoff, but Raistlin is like so great. He spends a lot of his early years like ferreting out charlatans.
Oh, crazy.
And like disproving these clerics who are trying to start these religious cults and stuff. And it's like, that's so complex for a D&D tie-in book. Like, it's not what you expect.
I think that at some point, as you're talking, you're going to need to tell everybody the party of Dragonlance, but keep going.
Sure. Yeah. We'll get into that because some of the characters actually were like initial defining things when the Hickmans were driving to TSR. This is another interesting thing. The gods don't allow characters to go above level 18. So if you level up to 19 without some kind of dispensation, they kick you out and you go somewhere else. So they send you to Faerun, or they send you to Dark Sun, or they...
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you want to stay there, you can withhold going to level 19 if you want to stay in Krynn. I was like, that's severe.
Yeah.
That's like brutal. There's a magocracy, so magic is gatekept by the Towers of High Sorcery, which there used to be 5, and I think there's 3.
Good.
And if you work outside of that, you're severely punished. They track you down, they bring you to the court, you're usually executed, or you have to join the group. So again, very weird, and it just has a classic high magic feel.
Right. And don't they have to take a test to become a mage, right?
Yeah, there's some kind of sorcery test where they go to this tower, and also magic is corrosive to your health. So the more powerful your magic is, the more it's going to hurt you and your physical health. So right. Raistlin is in very ill health when the book starts.
I love that you say that Raistlin's your favorite, because Raistlin was always my favorite.
Well, everyone's kind of dumb. Like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, this is D&D because something will happen. Everyone's like, no, we're gonna do this, and Raistlin's like, you guys are idiots.
Yeah,
you should stay on the forest path, don't go camping in there, and then bad shit happens, right? It's like, oh yeah, Raistlin, he may be morally ambiguous at best, but he's a smart cookie.
Yeah,
I fucking hate Sturm. I want to choke him.
Yeah, fuck
so
Sturm.
Goddamn bad.
Fuck Sturm.
He's such an asshole. But that's paladins for you, So I guess that's a good time to talk about the party.
Yeah.
So you have Tanis. I'm not going to remember their last names very well.
Tanis
something.
Half Elven, I know, is what they say to him, but
right. He's got a name. It's failing me right now. I didn't write it down. He's this half elf character. He's kind of the main character. One thing that's interesting about the books is they're written in a limited omniscient voice, which means it's third person, but the narrator will actually jump from perspective to perspective. So one moment you'll be kind of getting Tanis's thoughts and his perspective, and suddenly you'll jump to Sturm Brightblade and his thoughts, and then it'll jump to Tasselhoff or Raistlin. So all the characters get equal share in giving their perspective on things. Kind of like Dune. Dune is the same way. Although Dune is unlimited.
Right. So the reason we aren't saying Tanis's last name is because Tanis's name is actually Tanthalas Quisif Napa.
Well, that's his elvish name.
So what they call him outside of that is just Tanis Half Elven. That's it.
Well, I think he actually has a human last name as well. I was looking at his stat block in the book, and I think it has one. That's human. He does have his Qualan SD name, which is, there's a whole bunch of sub-elf stuff. So you have Tanis Half-Elven. You have Sturm Brightblade, which is like the severe Knights of Solamnia paladin. He's a real a-hole. You have Caramon, who's basically just a straight up fighter, and he is the twin brother of Raceland, and Raceland is a red mage, I believe, when things start.
Yeah, he's red for sure.
And when it's interesting because when the book starts, the characters already know each other, and they're having a homecoming of sorts, and they're coming back to the what is the name of their town? Their hometown. It's another word for comfort. But their inn is super cool. It's called Inn of the Last Home, and it's basically this huge tavern in a tree. So it's like a tavern tree house.
It's the coolest fucking beginning.
So awesome. And so they all know each other. They're coming back after 5 years, and Raceland's skin has changed. So it's golden, and his pupils are in the shape of hourglasses. So he just looks very off-putting and strange, and he always speaks in a raspy whisper. I'm like, oh man, that'd be such a fun character to play.
And he always is coughing too.
He's always coughing. He has very low constitution, you could say. There is...
Did you talk about his brother already? Sorry, I was looking at names.
Caramon. Yeah, Caramon, who's basically a straight-up fighter. They're twins.
And did you say their last name?
I don't remember their last name.
I don't know if I'm
Majore?
saying... Yeah, it's something...
Majore?
Majore. It's Majere, I think.
It's Major...
Oh, that's it.
Like that.
Yeah,
Majore. It's like it looks French, basically. And then there's Tasselhoff. Tasselhoff is what's known as a Kinder, and they're the Dragonlance version of halflings. Now, Kinder are notoriously maligned in D&D if you played back in the day, because apparently all the people who played Kinder were just assholes about it, because Kinder it's built into their race that they're natural thieves, so they're stealing things not to be malicious or for gain, but because they're infinitely curious.
Right.
So they'll just take like their party members' shit, and the way they write Tasselhoff is great in the books. He just suddenly has things and he's like, I was gonna give it back. Like, he's innocent in that way.
Yeah. And they seem, to me, and again, this is just my thought, they always seemed more like, they didn't seem short and fat like halflings and stuff. They just seemed smaller like humans, but kind of the...
More petite.
Yeah, and almost with an elvish quality, but not really.
A little Sylvan quality in there. High
Sylvan.
Voices, pointy ears, that kind of thing. No hairy, big, blocky feet or anything like that. And then you have Kitiara.
Oh, you're going with the old group. Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, she's part of it.
Right.
She's not in Autumn Twilight.
Right.
But they talk about her. She is the sister of Caramon and Raceland.
Right.
And she's full on evil. When the Hickmans were making the campaign world, they built 3 characters to represent, again, good, evil, and neutral. Tanis was neutral, excuse me. Gold Moon was good, and Kitiara was evil.
Oh, okay.
So they were the representations of those alignments in Dragonlance from the very beginning.
Nice.
And I should also say all the character stat blocks are in the books, and man, it's weird looking at the stat blocks because they're like way smaller.
Right, and their numbers are weird too.
And a lot of percentile stuff, and of course there's Thaco, so the AC, like a really good AC, was like -10. Oh yeah, AD&D. -10 is like an amazing AC.
Because the whole point is to hit armor class to 0.
Yeah, and you start at AC 10, which is the worst.
Right.
And then you go down, until you get to the negative AC, which is awesome. And then you have Gold Moon and Riverwind. And Gold Moon is she's a tribal princess. She's a really cool character. I'm pretty sure she would be a cleric.
Yeah, she is.
She's like a priestess. And Riverwind basically just hates everyone. He's like a big plains, like barbarian. But he's cool because something happens to him before the books start where he's in a weakened state. So he's got a little more complexity going on. I'm trying to remember who I'm forgetting. There's the barmaid from the Inn of the Last Home who catches up. Tika Wayland. She's the group's resident shield basher, so she's like a 0 level PC. So when she joins up with them, she basically just beats the shit out of their enemies with a shield. Yeah. That's what I remember from her. And I think that's it. There's also Lorana, but Lorana doesn't come in until book 2.
Right.
And she's kind of a love interest of Tanis, and I love Lorana. She's really cool.
Lorana's great. I think that's the main crew?
The dwarf.
Oh, Flint Fireforge.
Yeah, which is our friend John Dunstan. That's like one of his favorite characters.
It's like huge inspiration from that.
And I don't know why. I'd love to write a story that played against this, but the dwarves are always these kind of dumb comic relief, and Flint is like the epitome of that.
Yeah.
Again, weird racial stuff where he's deathly afraid of water. So like there's a point where the party has to cross this lake and he's like, nope, I'm not getting in that boat.
Oh, and then he falls in the water too.
He falls in the water, and he's allergic to horses, so he hates horses. And that's from AD&D 2nd edition. That was a thing, like dwarves are super suspicious of horses.
Yeah.
And so that is the party. And another interesting thing is currency was dependent on the culture in the area you were in. So like gold didn't mean anything. It wasn't a universal currency. So if you're in the Qualinesti forest with the elves, your human currency is not going to work there. So I was like, that's interesting. That could either be really fun or just a pain in the ass. There was a bunch of races that are really cool. Like first time you could play Minotaurs. There was this giant race called the Urda that you could play. Gnomes basically got defined for all of D&D from Krynn, which is the name of the world. They were proto-artificers, essentially.
Man, you're really like, even talking about this makes me want to go just start listening to the books.
Oh, you should. And it's one of the guys who does a bunch of voices on Simpsons.
Oh, nice.
I will look it up right now. Yeah, he's actually really good. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this, but he's a consummate voice actor. So because of Critical Role, I have this huge trust in voice actors as narrators.
Right.
It is Paul. It looks like Bomer, but it's not. It's like Paul Bimmer or something like that.
Oh.
And he does
nice.
like a lot of from Futurama. He does like the alien voices, and
nice.
You'll recognize his voice immediately when you hear it. And also another race that I love is the sub race of elves, the Sea Elves.
Oh, yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, very cool.
And you have the Darganesti, which are the deep elves, and the Dimmernesti, which are the shoal elves.
Or the Kaganesti,
but those are land elves.
Yeah.
Fuck those guys. And then it's the first time you get a Dragonborn type race, which are the Draconians.
I still remember reading the party's first encounter.
I just got through that.
When I first read that as a teenager, that monster was amazing to me. I was like, holy shit.
And they make them like slimy and smart, and they have these, I forgot that they have wings.
Yeah.
So they have these huge wings, and they turn to stone when you kill them, and super unique.
Well, some of them do.
Yeah, some of them turn to powder. And
well, like each one, because they're related.
There's blue and red and gold. And
yeah, and each one does something different to how they're related to their dragon ancestry. Like you said, some of them will turn to stone, some of them burst into flames, some of them burst into acid.
Right.
And like,
it's really cool.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And reading back through this, and like, I have to be honest, the books still hold up.
Oh, I bet.
I don't know that they are my favorite, but I'm like, for being a D&D book based off this campaign world, like, they really hit something. And I mean, it made the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
Like immediately, which is interesting because the publisher Random House was like, oh, these are unknown authors, first time authors. Like they didn't promote it at all. Like you couldn't find the book. So it was all word of mouth for the first book.
That's so cool.
It's just, if you want that classic high fantasy feel, Dragonlance is where it's at.
Oh yeah.
Like so much of it affected what we think of as D&D, whether it's your races or narrative being in the campaign world, because before that apparently it was a lot of hack and slash. So if you wanted story in your campaign world, you had to homebrew it as a DM. That's pretty much what I have. I love it. I have just as much, if not more, love for it now than when I first encountered it.
Well, I loved Dragonlance.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the books. The campaign setting seemed really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Just good. I will just back Eric up on the thought that, yeah, if you're looking for inspiration in a high fantasy thing and you've never read those, check one of them out. It is
They're classic.
Really cool.
Those books have, and this world specifically, has influenced just everybody.
Everybody. And to that note, what I would even say, and stop me if I go too far, Eric.
You've gone too far.
Oh, I knew it. I researched a world that's pretty new.
Speaking of voice actors.
Yeah, speaking of voice actors, speaking of Dragonlance, speaking of, what's that guy's name you brought up earlier? Joe?
Oh, Joe Manganiello.
Yeah. Joe Manganiello, speaking of him, all of these things all connect to the world that I looked at that has become something I've really started to fall in love with. And I was looking at Exandria, specifically Tal'Dorei, and that's the world from Critical Role that Matthew Mercer and some other people have created, to adventure in. And the first thing to just say right out the gate, something that's interesting to me, is hearing you talk about Dragonlance. There is a area in Wildemount, which is the other continent, where there's the Krynn dynasty.
I know. I keep seeing that. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on?
It's spelled different.
Right.
But I would feel remiss if I thought that Matthew Mercer did not love Dragonlance. I feel like he loved Dragonlance because there is a lot of that same vibe of that classic high fantasy tucked within Tal'Dorei. Now I've been reading the Tal'Dorei campaign setting, and I also have the Wildemount campaign setting. So I've touched a little bit on the Wildemount, but mostly I looked at Tal'Dorei. And what some of the stuff that I've really loved about it is, take for example, you're talking about Dragonlance, and there was this cataclysm, right? Tal'Dorei has basically had 3 cataclysms that have messed everything up before we get to the age where the Vox Machina, for those that don't know, is the first campaign of Critical Role, and there's been like I said, 3 cataclysms up to that. And as I'm reading this, I'm reading about right after one of the cataclysms, one of the situations was the Chromatic Enclave, or the Chroma Enclave is what it's called. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. What is that? And I start reading about it, and it was this group of dragons. I think it's 4 dragons that kind of rise and just cause chaos through Tal'Dorei. And I was like, oh, that is such a sick background story for shaping your world. And I was like, oh wait, Vox Machina dealt with that. That literally is in the first campaign of them dealing with this. One of the arcs they did was dealing with the Chroma Enclave, which were these 4 dragons. And so reading through that, I was like, God, I really love how that's integrated into the history of the world. And it reminded me, just like you're saying, Dragonlance, I loved Dragonlance. I love Faerun, but Faerun is very vanilla, and that's okay, because sometimes you just need very vanilla world. It's
a good world for D&D currently to have as the generic, if you don't know what to play in,
right,
play in Faerun.
Because it's just very vanilla and it's easy, and when you throw Krynn out there, some of the stuff gets weird.
It gets real weird,
right? And I loved how he kind of brought some of that Krynn stuff, or that old school Dragonlance feel, to this. And I would have normally probably not given this Exandria world much of a chance, but the more I started reading its history, I was like, oh wow, there's a lot to this. There's a love put into this world. Oh wow.
Right.
So again, the gods are heavily involved with their influences in a way in Tal'Dorei or in Exandria. And in specifically Tal'Dorei, they really set you up with a lot of factions that you can use. A lot of groups that have motives and are trying to do things. And in the book, there's each section, each thing talks about oh, this is what the society, not even doing society, kind of sociologically and just goods they do. What's the word I'm looking for? Culturally, that's all very given to you in the books. And I also loved, as I'm reading this, all over the place, and this is something I think that you would appreciate as well, being in the books, all over the place, it kind of has that Numenera feel, where it's nice. Hey, once you take any of this, it's yours. You melt it, you change it, you manipulate it. If you don't need these things, don't put them. If you want to change the landscape of this whole thing, do it, because I created this, I being Matt Mercer and the people, we made this for you to either hold true to the stuff that we've done if you want to adventure that way, or bend it to what you want. Like that's stated over and over. And I was like, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing to see over and over again. I also loved how in both of the campaign settings, they leave areas unexplored. Like they're like, this area up here, unexplored. Nobody really, like, it's still not explored. You know, it's still dangerous out there. And I was like, I appreciate that. And it really made me start to like the world a little bit more, because it's not all like defined already. There's not, even within what they do in Critical Role, there's certain areas that they're like, oh yeah, people don't go out there. Like, it's dangerous. There's
a wilderness.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And I was like, God, I really love that they do that. That gives the people playing a real cool sandbox area to go mess around with, that there's been no one touching it, you know? And that also leaves it to like the age that they're in is like right on the cusp of like technology, you know, like there's in like Wildmount and Marquette, there seems to be a movement to you're like getting into Steam and you're getting into black powder and some of these things. And some people would be like, oh, I don't really want to use that stuff in my campaign. Well, yeah, it even says like in the campaign book, hey, if you're not ready to like let this stuff be in there, just don't talk about it. It doesn't have to be there.
Cut it out.
Yeah, cut it out.
Yeah.
I loved how they used one of the characters from Critical Role. They're one of the people that kind of invented this black powder situation. They had some sort of...
Percy.
Yep. They had these secrets. And then when you go into Wildmount, you know, you can see, because in the Wildmount campaign setting, it's about 20 years after what happened with the final arc in Vox Machina. So you can see how 20 years has changed a lot of things. And, you know, there's some places that have other technology, and I really like being on the cusp of that for the games that I like to play as a DM. I've never played in that as a player, so I don't know how I would like that. It sounds fun. Also, the first time I encountered this, two things in a campaign setting, and you might be able to help me out because you've read some more of this than I have, but drugs in a campaign setting that literally have tables and stuff that you roll on if you take drugs, these certain drugs that are popular. And I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And then again, in letter, like in a little thing, it says, hey, make sure to talk to your players before introducing this into the game, because not everybody is going to be into that. So make sure to talk to your players. And I was like, it gives me more and more like of an insight, at least from what I can tell, to this figure that stands at the front of so much of D&D's popularity right now, which is Matthew Mercer. And love him or hate him, he has brought this game to a lot of people. And that is what ultimately a lot of us would want, to get more content, more this, more that, to move tabletop RPGs in a better direction. Because the more attention it has, granted, some negatives will come of that, but a lot of positives.
I think it's good to have, if you care about the game, having some scrutiny on the contents and how the game is run is good, because it makes the game have to be better. And I mean, we wouldn't have all the books we have in 5e if it weren't for Critical Role, because there wouldn't be nearly as many people playing.
All right. It'd still be, I mean, there's still a lot of people playing. D&D is pretty big, but this has changed the game. Back to what I was saying, so the drugs. And then I was reading, and there is, right here, I have the thing, crime. When you get caught for crimes, there's penalties, man. And I'm like, holy shit, that's amazing. I so want to do that for a campaign, like have that like as a backset type thing, like, oh, you guys were doing criminal activity. Well, you got caught. Here's what you can pay. You can do this. You do this. Here's the situation. So I really loved that was in there. Yeah. It also talks about, again, I'm mostly like almost reviewing this book, but I'm really just kind of trying to say that there's a lot of love that's put into this world. And I guess that's what's drawn me to it, is how dynamic it seems to have been created. I'm like, that is fascinating to me, because just as like a passing fan originally of Critical Role, like someone that just thought it was like, okay, but didn't really care. I didn't really give it the attention or the thought that it actually deserved, because there's a lot of depth in there, whether or not we get to see that as the audience or as anything. When you buy these books and like get to investigate the world, it's way more nuanced, and it lets you like, and then if you go back and watch Critical Role, you're like, oh, holy shit, that's why that happened, and that's why that happened.
Right.
And they don't talk about it, but because I've read the book, I know here in that place, because he gives you like a description of what type of crime goes on, like mostly in each kind of area. Mm-hmm. So it's like, in Whitestone, there's a lot of thieves, in this, there's a lot of murderers, and over here,
mm-hmm.
And it tells you like percentage of, human to tiefling to dwarf ratios in this city.
Mm-hmm.
So you get like a good like mix of, this city would kind of look like this, and these are the people you'd kind of see. So again, building those dynamic worlds like we've talked about, super fun.
Yeah, for sure.
They seem to embrace the idea of culture
on
the characters rather than it being like, orcs are evil. Nope, not in this.
Right,
not in
right.
here. Pretty much anything within Exandria, if it has an intelligence of like 10,
mm-hmm.
you can't define whether it's going to be good or evil based on just it being like, it could be a bugbear. It might be a good guy. Like, you don't know.
Right. Yeah. Not just defined by its race doesn't define its morality.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
The last thing I'm going to touch on is something that people that have listened to Campaign 1 are going to know what these are. But it's a type of magical item that I feel has always been sorely needed in D&D, but there's not a lot of it. But that's the Vestiges of Divergence is what he calls them
mm-hmm.
in this. And they're basically magical items that level up with you.
Okay, nice.
And it doesn't level up based on like your experience points, because it talks about how to level up these vestiges, and it has to do with the guide gives you like a list of like a bunch of stuff. It's like you either want a character development thing, like some sort of
mm-hmm.
overcome something morally or do something against their morals, very like character defining things will cause these vestiges to level up with them.
That's cool.
And I really liked that idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I thought you would like that.
Yeah.
Because you're like, that is cool.
Well, definitely, I'm watching episode 7 of Vox Machina on Prime,
mm-hmm.
and it's getting into Percy's backstory, and that's exactly what it reminds me of. Is he came up with this idea for this basically Gatling pistol.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 6-barrel pistol, and it's got the names of the people he wants to get revenge on the barrel. And as he takes them out, the names disappear.
Yeah,
and you start finding out how he came with it, and it's like, it's totally tied to his character development.
Yep, 100%.
So I can see that through line for sure.
And what was super cool, and again, this is just for me, I haven't watched the whole campaign 1. I've watched the end, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And now as I'm looking through just kind of articles and whatnot on the internet, there's multiple arcs in each of the campaigns that go on for 30 or 40 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they resolve that arc and it moves to a new arc.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, so if I wanted to know about the Chroma Enclave, there is an arc that's about 40 episodes that deals with only the Chroma Enclave.
Right.
And then there's the Whispered one, which is the Vecna situation.
Right.
That's, a totally separate arc. And then
there's the Briarwood arc.
The Briarwood arc, yep. And I really am starting to appreciate kind of how that stuff is set up. And I'm wrapping myself up
mm-hmm.
here. Coming from someone that started a homebrew, not even knowing what I was doing, I definitely am wanting to try and run a pre-generated one so I can see how that's done
mm-hmm.
and get the merits from that as well.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think the value in learning to DM how you have is that those lessons are now like burned or seared into your mind on like, that's why you don't do problem A or you don't do action B is because it has this kind of fallout. And even though it's not pleasant, I think it's just invaluable to learn that way, Oh,
for sure. And it's been brutal,
mm-hmm.
but it's been fun. Like I tell Eric all the time, I'm like, hey man, thanks for pulling me back into this world, because I do love it.
Yeah.
As much as I want to murder all my friends occasionally, I love D&D.
I think that's part of DMing is like, if you're not getting frustrated at a certain point, you're probably not playing the game. Like I'm not saying not playing it right. You're probably not getting together with your friends on a weekly to semi-weekly basis
Right.
and playing, because you have to work out social issues through the table.
Yeah.
Like things that have nothing to do with your character or rolling dice or stats. I mean, it's the same thing. I'm reworking my Monday campaign because of what has happened, and I'm super excited now.
Nice.
Because I had to rework things, and I read back through my initial like overall arc, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Nothing's broken. This is like sweet. Awesome. So
Nice.
those problems are usually blessings in disguises as long as you follow through.
Yeah.
That's a big trick. So, well, that's really cool. Even hearing you talk about Critical Role makes me get more appreciation for it. Like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, there's a lot of like the drug use and the crime and the diversity of cultures is something I liked. Because even back, year and a half ago, hearing about how Mercer treated orcs and how a lot of these quote unquote monstrous races formed their own nation essentially because they were tired of being discriminated against. So I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I've started to appreciate the way he runs his table.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's good.
For what they do and what that is, it's like, oh,
yeah,
okay, I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got one more thing to do before we close out. We did this in our December Christmas episode. We did a game called Storytime, and we're actually developing a version that we're going to give out to everybody for free. And it's going to include some dice rolls and some different things. So it's just called Storytime, and we're going to start just with the basic rules. Very simple. We're using Dan Harmon's story circle as a base, but I've modified it a little bit. So the first rule is always choose the most interesting option. So whenever you're making a decision or anything like that, you always want it just to be the most interesting thing. There's no winning in this game. I'm not trying to beat Ian. He's not trying to beat me. We're using game mechanics to tell an interesting off-the-wall story. And if you remember our story about Jerry, it was very weird and awesome. So you choose the following. You choose who, what, when, where, and why. So who's the person that we're telling it about? What are they doing? When is it? Distant past, in the future? Where does it take place? Is it in a fantasy land? Are they on a spaceship? Are they in a cul-de-sac? And why are they doing what they're doing? And this isn't meant to give... You don't have to think about it a lot. You just want to snap through it. So we're going to decide who goes first. Ian, you want a D6, I want a D6, and we'll just both roll.
Okay. I'm rolling.
Okay.
5.
I got 6.
Fuck you.
We're going to say that whoever rolls the highest, they get to decide who starts picking first. So I want you to pick who the story is about.
Jerry.
Okay, it's about Jerry. Same Jerry as before?
Jerry.
Jerry?
Just Jerry.
Okay, just Jerry. They are filing for they're filing for dual citizenship to another country. I don't know if it's a real country, but it's a different country than they live.
Okay.
When is it?
Like time of day or just
time period, time of day? Just when is it?
It's Greek times.
Greek times. Greek time. Okay. So we're talking about ancient Greece.
Ancient Greece-ish. That's the
a Greek named Jerry applying for dual citizenship in ancient Greece. Okay.
And he's applying for dual. Oh wait, you get to pick that.
So that's the why. You actually get to pick it, but I'm going to pick the where. Jerry is in ancient Persia.
All right.
And we're going to say it's a fantasy version of Persia. So this is Persia with magic.
Okay.
And sorcery is real. The reason why I picked Persia is because I'm listening to hardcore history about the Persians, and it's just blasting my mind once again.
And what am I picking now?
Why is he doing this? Or she. Could be a she.
This is a he. This is the Jerry.
This is a he, Jerry.
Why is he doing this? Because his family has left him because of his nightmares, and he's gonna go. He's filing for dual citizenship in a Far East country.
So like China or Mongolia.
Some sort of Far East thing, yeah.
Somewhere, some fantasy version of that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read through the story circle really quick. Okay. And then we'll just talk about, we get these little things called plot twists is what we're going to really roll for. So the character is in a familiar situation, which Harmon calls a zone of comfort. They're somewhere they know, but they are thrown into discomfort. They want something, something is taken away, something goes wrong in some way, or they don't have something they want. They must pass a threshold of some kind. So it can be a physical threshold, emotional, doesn't matter. They enter an unfamiliar or uncomfortable situation. They are tested. They adapt to it one way or another. They get what they think they wanted, but they pay heavy price for it. And think is in brackets, so it may not be what they want. That's a classic trope in storytelling. Is like halfway through the hero gets what they want and they realize it's not what they want.
Right.
So you can always do what's called a sequel. So we could play the story circle and find out, oh, this is only the first part. Let's do a second round. Not today.
Right.
But you can do that. They return to their familiar situation having changed. On their turn, a player narrates one of the story points, and we just go through it until we get to the end. So it's A through H, essentially.
Got it.
Story is told until we get there. A given player can call for a plot twist 2 times during the story. So Ian could be narrating, let's say, going into an unfamiliar situation. I can say plot twist, and then I roll a d10, and I pick whatever I roll. So, for instance, if I roll a 5, the hero is traumatized by what's currently happening.
Nice.
So Ian has to build that into the story. It may be something super mundane. When we release this, I'm going to have a D100 table. So it'll be like a wild magic table from D&D. It might not be every single number is a different thing, but eventually that's what I want it to be, so it has a very random feel. So you have a lot more options than just the 10. This is our draft. And then you can do a sequel if needed, like we're talking about. So I'm going to start.
Okay.
Jerry, or more anciently known as Jirai.
Jirai.
Jarius. Jarius is in the Persian version of the DMV. And he's sitting in there and he's filling out his clay tablet in cuneiform. And he's very well versed in cuneiform.
Beautiful.
And that's his zone. Right there. Take it away.
What's the second thing?
Thrown into discomfort. They want something's taken away. They're thrown off balance somehow.
So then his number is called, and he's filling out his cuneiform, and he's not done, and he looks up, and they're calling his name, and apparently they've been calling it for a few times. Mm-hmm. So one of the guards has come over and been like, "Hey, are you Jerry?" And he looks up. He's like, "Yeah, I'm Jerry. No, I'm Jarius. Yes." And he goes, "You're up." And he, with his big hand, reaches down and grabs his little paperwork and picks Jerry up at the same time and takes his paperwork away and walks him to one of the podiums, just a bunch of podiums, and shoves Jerry up to this person and then walks away, still holding Jerry's papers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where it would leave, right? Because he just lost something.
That's he lost his thing. So he turns around and he's like, "Excuse me, sir, my tablets." And the big guard is just gone. Not necessarily he disappeared, but he's nowhere to be seen. So Jarius turns back around, and there's a big ogre standing on the other side of the kiosk, and this ogre looks very displeased. And he's like, instead of paperwork, it's clay work, so he's like, "Clay work?" And Jarius is like, I don't, they took it away. And the ogre, yes.
Plot twist.
Okay, here we go.
D10.
Roll your D10.
That's a 9.
9. The hero can suddenly fly.
All right.
If the hero can already fly, they suddenly lose the power of flight. So, as the ogre is talking like, "Oh, this is highly irregular. Where's your clay work?" Jarius, in the ancient tongue, he starts to fly. And he starts to float, and he can't really control it. And then the ogre pulls this rope that's connected to a bell. Cling! And that's the illegal sorcery bell. Right there. And Jarius knows he's in trouble, and he sees an opening. And on both sides of this opening are these lions, statues of these lions, not real lions. And he can't see beyond the door for some reason. It's just totally blanked out. Maybe by magic, maybe by something else. and he flies through it as the guards are called and they're chasing after him, and he flies through the threshold.
And as he flies through the what's the he enters a unfamiliar, right? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, they enter an unfamiliar or uncomfortable situation.
Cool. Jarius flies like a slow-moving rocket, just moving real slowly. Gets through the door, and it lets him through, and he feels kind of tingly as he goes through it, and he looks around.
Plot twist.
All right. What do you got for me?
Here we go. Let's see, 6. A random item suddenly falls from the sky.
So as he is getting this weird tingling sensation all over his body as he floats through the door, he floats into this room, and it's just like white marble seating everywhere. It's like a bench all the way around the room, and everybody is naked sitting on the benches, and they all have like numbers they're holding. And as Jerry's sitting there floating, something smacks him in the head and goes bang and hits the ground, and he looks down, and it's his clay cuneiform tablets, but they're broken on the ground. So he flies down, he starts picking them up, looks up, and is just dumbfounded by all of the naked people. And then he hears someone's number called, and someone stands up. This naked guy. Jerry sees him in all of his glory and is like, oh. The guy turns and walks through this other door, and all they hear is just this horrifying grinding and a little. That's it.
Is that the handoff?
I think so.
Okay. So he's like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're fucking doing. And he starts pulling off the ancient Persian equivalent of a button-down shirt. Probably a robe or toga of some kind. Starts pulling it off. And he hangs dong. And everyone in the room turns to look at him.
Plot twist!
Okay, roll it.
It's a 9 again.
So re-roll. We'll say if you read it right for now, since we only have 10. Reroll if we get a double.
That's a 5.
The hero is the hero is traumatized by what's currently happening. So, everyone looks at him and they all point, and he starts going, no, 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 and he falls down and he starts rocking, no. And some time passes, and that's where we hand it off.
What's this, where are we at?
This is, they adapt to it one way or another, so it doesn't have to be that he wins. So he somehow he gets used to the situation.
He's sitting there rocking back and forth, looks down and sees his broken cuneiform tablet that he was filling out, and it's not completed yet. And it goes, fuck you guys. Starts pushing it all together, so it's like...
Plot twist.
All right.
I think I just re-rolled. Yep. I rolled the same number we've both done that now. I rolled a 6, so I'm going to re-roll.
All right.
3. Yes. Yes. The hero poops his pants. Or lack of pants. He poops himself.
He just poops. He's like, fuck you guys. He goes, he's got his cuneiform tablet. He just starts grunting. And just plops out a turd. Just plow. It hits the ground. Makes like a sound as it hits. He turns around. Everybody, all of these naked people are just staring at him, horrified. He picks up the poop and smears it in the cracks of his cuneiform tablet and pushes it together. And then he waits. And just sitting there naked, taking deep breaths. Some time passes. Another number is called. Same thing. Lady gets up this time. Everyone sees Jerry staring. Jarius. Jarius totally staring this naked lady down as she goes into that weird room. Same thing. Hear the grinding. Weird. And then a little. The poop dries. He picks up his cuneiform tablet. He etches out the rest of it, and he turns around to go back through the door. And I think he makes a little fart and walks back through the door.
Walks back through the door?
Yep.
Okay, is that the handoff?
Yeah.
All right. So he goes back through the door, and the guards are there waiting for him. For some reason, they can't pass through the door. And they grab him, and they manhandle him, and he holds on to his poopy tablet. And they bring him up to the ogre, and he says, "Give me this!" And, "This tablet smells like shit." But he looks through it, and ogres are pretty impervious to gross things. And he's like, "Well, everything seems in order. Take this number." And they prick his thumb. And they put it on. Somehow they have, we'll say papyrus. So they put a little bloody thumbprint on the number, and they send him back through the doorway, the threshold. So he's sitting there, still poopy in his butt, like no time to clean anything.
Right.
And then his number gets picked, and we're gonna say it's number 72.5. And a scribe comes out, "Number 72.5. And he slowly trudges because he feels a little ominous about this. He's like, this grinding sound with the screams, like, are they murdering people? And the people aren't coming back out. This is worrisome. He gets in there, and there's a little goblin. And the goblin's like, "Ticket?" And he snatches the ticket as soon as it's handed out. And there's a little ancient shredder. So the goblin puts the paper in and shreds it, has a little crank, and you can hear the paper go, "Eh." And you can, Jarius feels his soul get sucked out through his body. And then they give him, for some reason, a modern passport out of the blue. Like, "Here you go." And so he gets his passport, but he loses his soul.
Brutal.
That's the handoff.
Oh.
Now they return their familiar situation.
He looks at his passport, and it's a picture of him somehow. There's a little photograph.
Nice.
He looks at it, and it kind of winks at him, and he's like, "Huh." He would put it in his pocket, but he did not collect his clothing.
Nope.
So there's two doors that he can leave. One says in, one says out. And he's like, "I might go in through the outdoor. I might go out the out." So he goes to the outdoor, and it just leads him outside. He's standing there with his new passport for dual citizenship, with no clothes, staring at the bright sun, excited to go to the far east.
And some poop in his butt.
Yeah, he's definitely poopy still.
Yep. And that is the end. I think there could be a sequel to that.
Oh, there would totally be a sequel.
So I feel like we should both have 3 plot twists.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 plot twists I think is good. And of course, more like a D100 is definitely, I think,
Oh, yeah.
a good table to roll on. But that's Storytime in its proto version. We're going to keep playing it every once in a while. And if you do play it, let us know how it goes. And if you come up with any cool things that we are too dumb to consider.
Yeah, let us
That'd
know.
be cool. Yeah. So I think I'm supposed to close it out.
Yeah, just have you do it.
Okay. Well, listeners, we hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let us know what your favorite campaign worlds are. And let's say campaign worlds if you don't play D&D. Fictional worlds.
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
Dresden.
Wheel of Time, Dresden Files, Jane
Witcher.
Austen, whatever. It doesn't have to be fantasy. We're interested to hear it. But
Yeah.
we love you guys.
Love
and
you.
We hope that you stay safe out there and that you stay sweaty.
Stay sweaty, baby.
Stay sweaty. Sweaty, sweaty, sweaty. And I'm stopping. Oh, hi. Look at you listening all the way to the end. You know what? I think that deserves a level up. So go ahead. You level up with your bad self. And if you like what we do, please share it with your fellow humans. We love doing this podcast, and we'd love to have more people listening. We have a link tree in the description that links to all the links that are linked therein and forthwith. Also, Jerry did our badass music, and what you hear is only the tip of the iceberg. You can check out all his notes and scales and chords at theplayercharacter.com. Well, that's all for Meow. Remember to roll high and take a point of inspiration.
like, share, subscribe.